Hey guys, I'm the Drink Pro. Today I'm drinking two different pours of ancient age from 6 decades apart. Hey guys, thanks for joining me again. The Drink Pro Kyle here with you today with a couple of really interesting pours. I've got a regular ancient age, the 10-star edition from 2020, and I've got a 1975 ancient age sample to do side by side. Now, what's the difference between ancient age and ancient age? It's pretty simple actually. One's just older than the other. The ancient age in modern times is approximately 6 years old, and the ancient age in modern times is approximately 4 years old. But that's not super clear because a lot of these products are not age stated, so you just have to kind of go on what people have heard from the distillery or what people are telling each other. One of the important things to note as well is that the modern ancient age is using the classic Buffalo Trace No. 2 mash bill. That's the high rye mash bill. It's sort of the entry bourbon for that mash bill. There are several other great products along that line, but ancient age is your baseline entry point. One thing that's worth noting about this is that ancient age is actually a whiskey that's always been with Buffalo Trace. I've talked in a previous video about the fact that the Buffalo Trace distillery historically was the George T. Stagg distillery, and some people in the 70s and 80s actually referred to that distillery as the ancient age distillery. It was kind of known for this product among many other things. Now, some of you might be asking, why am I so excited to try two different, essentially entry-level beginner bourbons? Part of it's because this is a really fun experiment about the times that we're living in. Right now we're in the middle of a bourbon boom. Bourbon is bigger than perhaps it's ever been, and people are going crazy for new products. So there's a lot of bourbon that's being made very quickly, trying to get it onto the shelves. In fact, there's a lot of old stock that's being pulled and released, and the care and the time that goes into making bourbon is hard to maintain when you've got a gold rush like this. So people have said that modern pours, even compared to pours just 5 or 10 years ago, are made with less care, they're not as good, they're not as special. I've heard that several times over. Conversely, in the 70s, bourbon was not being drank with the kind of veracity it is today. In fact, bourbon sales were incredibly slow. Part of the reason light whiskey made such a push in the 70s was that bourbon distributors and bourbon distillers were eager to keep making products, eager to stay in business, but a lot of their older stuff and a lot of their richer, oakier product was not selling. In fact, part of the reason that ancient age and ancient age have this kind of low bottom of the shelf status is because they're older whiskeys. There was a time when older whiskeys were kind of seen as lesser than. People didn't want old bourbon. They wanted younger products. Historically, the younger whiskeys were the prime brands, and the older whiskeys were kind of relegated to the back. People didn't want the older stuff. So a lot of times you'll hear that very old with the Old Fitzgerald, or ancient age with the George T. Stagg distillery, which then became Buffalo Trace. These are really functions of the times. At that time, people did not want old whiskey, but they do today. And so you might see 4, 5, or 6-year-old whiskeys in these ancient age products, but they're going to have 12-year, 15-year, 18-year products on the shelves now, whereas that would not have been a premium product in the past. So without further ado, let's dig in to the 1975 ancient age. Now this is at 86 proof. And I want to also point out that the ancient age is a 10-star. I believe that's an 80 proof product. I'll have to confirm that though. Just opening that ancient age released this wonderful nose that I'm really excited to try. This is going to be a fun one, guys. Shout out to Alan Ernst for this sample of ancient age 1975. Cheers, Alan. I appreciate your support. And shout out Nate Cooper for the ancient age 10-star. Nate's been a regular contributor, and I'm excited to have some more of his stuff on the show. So let's go ahead and give these a shot. Already, just after pouring them, I don't know if you can see how much lighter the ancient age from the 2020 bottle is compared to this 1970 ancient age. Obviously the second ancient should mean it's older, right? Well, not in this case, but that's because of the era. Right now, so much bourbon's flying off the shelves, and back then they couldn't get rid of the old stuff. I'm gonna start with the newer bottle first. Let's go with this ancient age 10-star. Wow, very sweet, almost sickly sweet. There's a very slight metallic note to it. It's all buttercream on the nose. Strong vanilla, strong buttercream, a sweet vanilla icing with cherry. Maybe the malty cereal note kind of shows up as well, but there's not too much going on the nose of this. If you go looking for it, you might find a very slight floral note, maybe like a slight geranium. I'm really digging into this trying to find some other notes, but there's really not much going on. It's almost entirely this vanilla icing, very subtle fruity note, maybe just a hint of baking spice, like a very, very slight cinnamon, very, very slight almond. They're all really subtle, but they're there. They're just very quiet compared to the overwhelming sweetness of this vanilla icing, buttercream icing thing that's going on. All right, now let's go to the Ancient Age from 1975. Wow, it's very metallic. It's very sharp on the nose. Wow, that is really deep and almost sour. I definitely still get that vanilla note, but it's not nearly as sweet. I'm almost getting entirely this really sharp metallic. It's actually the kind of metallic note that I tend to get from like new make. It's also the same kind of metallic note I get from Irish whiskey. Like a Jameson has this really high metallic note that I always pick up. But underneath that, I get a little bit more woodiness. You can definitely smell the oak on this, which I can't pick up at all on the regular Ancient Age. The nutty almond note's still there though. It's very, very subtle on this initial pour, but the older pour I really get more of that nuttiness. The oakiness and the nuttiness show up a lot more. But you have to get past that initial sharpness, which might be difficult for some people. I'm getting more caramel too. The vanilla buttercream is still there, but there's also this definite caramel note throughout it. I almost get this sort of burnt orange quality out of it, which is really interesting. Like an orange with cloves, maybe peppercorns too. A lot more going on in the older pour, and some of that baking spice is showing up, a little bit more citrus showing up. So let's go ahead and give them a taste. Let's start with the newer pour, Ancient Age. Very, very simple. It's incredibly sweet, again like this icing. Then you get this very clear malty grain quality in the mid palate. And then there's this bitter barrel note on the finish. It doesn't linger very long, it's not particularly complex, but those are really the notes I'm getting. Let's do another taste. I'm getting a lot of corn and this artificial caramel flavoring as well. That bitterness in the mid palate, that barrel bitterness, it's almost like a nuttiness, but it's unpleasant. I do not care for that. The finish is a little bit woody, a little bit more complex, but there's a real bitterness in this that just not my cup of tea. Or cup of bourbon. I guess that's almost an herbal bitterness in the mid palate. That's really what I'm picking up is this herbal bitterness. It almost has like a medicinal quality. But right out of the gate, it's very sickly sweet, goes into this bitterness, hints of wood on the back. It's not a bad pour overall. It's not maybe my preference in the price range, but if you want to spend, a low dollar figure and get a drinkable bourbon, it's a good option. And certainly it's from a line where you kind of know what you're getting into. It's not the prime example of the mash bill number 2, but it reminds you of a lot of those same things. That herbal note that I'm getting in the mid palate that has that bitterness, that's very much going to be a rye note that's more refined on a higher dollar point bourbon. Okay, let's go ahead and taste this 1975 Ancient Age. It is so incredibly smooth. It's honestly hard for me to get any notes out of it. It's almost like drinking water. That is weird. This is 86 proof. That's incredible. That's super weird. Now I have this tinkle on my tongue in the finish. It's like dancing of pepper, which is really nice. It doesn't have the bitterness of the modern Ancient Age. It's incredibly smooth though. I get that very subtle metallic note. I get a little bit of vanilla. Then I get almost this slight minty note in the mid palate. Instead of the bitter herbs of the Ancient in the modern era, I get this light, gentle, minty sweetness on the mid palate. And the finish has very little woodiness. It's got a little bit of pepper and a little bit of like a pecan on the finish. As I keep going back to it, that wonderful soft woody note and nuttiness in the mid palate and the finish respectively really stands out. I mean, this is an incredibly smooth pour. You could sit there and drink this all day and not have a second thought about it. The modern stuff is a lot sweeter and a lot harsher. This is incredibly smooth. That's the word. People talk about in a shaming kind of way the smoothness of bourbon, like that's something to, not aspire to. But if you have a really good smooth pour, that's a good thing. It's better for it to be smooth and flavorful than smooth and not flavorful. But if the flavors are going to be bad or harsh, I would probably prefer the smooth pour. This is preferable to a lot of the younger, cheaper stuff on the market today, in part because there's just not much happening in it. And that's a good thing. Vanilla, caramel, maple syrup, slight woody note, slight nutty note, a little bit of pepper on the tongue. Far, far superior pour. I don't know what the Ancient Age went for in 1975. I don't know what the MSRP was at that time, but I guarantee you it's worth it, and then some. The Ancient Age 10-year, let's go back to it. It doesn't get anywhere close. It doesn't stand a chance, guys. It's all out of whack. It's all out of balance. It's super sweet, and then it's really bitter, and then it's harsh at the end. It's just jolting you around. The Ancient Age from 1975 does none of that. It's not particularly flavorful, but boy, is it balanced, it's nuanced, it's subtle, and it's smooth. When you're paying a low dollar amount for a pour of whiskey, that's a pretty good review. So I'm going to stick with the Ancient Age from 1975. Again, shout out Alan Ernst, shout out Nate Cooper. Thank you so much for the samples. If you want to be a part of the channel, please reach out to me. I love taking in samples. I love trying new things. If you feel like you can't donate whiskey, please consider joining my Patreon. I've got great content up there that's only available through Patreon, great merch that you can get there as well. And, you know, it's only the price of a small cup of coffee each month, so please consider joining. Yeah. The soft, sweet, mint subtleness of 1975 wins all day. I'm going to finish up this pour, though, of the Ancient Age 10-star. I can't let good whiskey go to waste, or at least mediocre whiskey. But in the meantime, you all keep drinking like professionals. Cheers.